Hi, guys. Let's see. Ed did a great job, I understand, last month talking about Meshtastic, and then he went on the following week talking a little bit about Meshcore. I am by no means an expert on Meshcore, but I have been dabbling with it now for about 5 or 6 months, and I found it to be fairly intriguing. And so I carry a Meshtastic device in my pocket everywhere I go. For those of you that have mesh pockets, you know what I'm talking about. And that's a great little device. It's recharged my phone several times already, so I really like the mesh pocket. So I got into Meshcore initially just to put my feet in it and see what it was. And when I started, there weren't that many Meshcore nodes around me. But I can guarantee you it has blossomed significantly in the last 4 months. And I'll show you that in just a few minutes. I'm using my iPad tonight. I haven't used my iPad for PowerPoint in donkey's ages, so bear with me. I'm doing this because it'll allow me to bring up the Meshcore app and we can see some live stuff going back. I'm going to pick on Steve down here and a few other people to send traffic when I get to that point. So we're going to start out with what is Meshcore, if you don't know what it is. Meshcore node roles, and that's kind of an important concept to learn about. You don't have an equivalent in Meshtastic per se, and then I'll illustrate the growing user base. So what is Meshcore? Well, like Meshtastic, it's an open source messaging platform. I will tell you there's been an issue since April where there's been a split between a couple of the early Meshcore developers. And so there's two websites that you can go to for Meshcore related firmware. I personally use the meshcore.io site. That's the one that the original developers came up with, original developers being Scott Powell and Liam Colte. I think that's spelled correctly. Scott did the initial firmware development, and Liam did a lot of the stuff that wraps around it, the website, the map service you can go to see Meshcore devices, and a lot more. Between the two, they've been fairly productive. Andy Kirby worked with those two gentlemen, and he's the one that split off back in April his own Meshcore website. There's been some trademark issues going on related to that. And Andy is focusing more on revenue generating. He has his own Meshcore app called Mesh OS, of which you pay a fee for to use. There's pros and cons either way, but I personally, and for what you'll see besides, oh good, it's not coming up there. Richard is trying to grab my attention here with a Meshcore announcement. Okay, so it started in late 2024 at Meshcore.io, version done by Scott and Liam. You can actually go to their GitHub website, and the code is all there. You can submit bugs through that website, through the GitHub account project they have. There's also a ton of information. They put together a really great user reference there at GitHub that you can go and review. It uses LoRa radios like Meshtastic. In fact, this particular device, this is from Heltec. It's called a Heltec V4 expansion kit. It is set up as a repeater. This device here, Elcrow, ELCROW, ThinkNode M5. They both are using the ESP32 chips, which means they're very power hungry compared with a device like the Mesh Pocket, which uses an NRF52XXX series chip, which is very power mising. Doesn't take much power. But at home, my repeater is attached to this high gain antenna. And for 915 megahertz, that's a pretty big in size antenna, by the way. So I literally turn the device off, switch antennas, and this hangs in my window. And you'll see a picture of that. And that gets me out into the mesh world. This repeater opened up the world for me. Back when it was acting as a companion only, I couldn't get anything. Thank you. ISM band, same as Meshtastic. But one of them, you'll illustrate here is if you look down further, Meshcore in the US and Canada, the preset is on 910.525. If you're running Meshtastic, besides the fact that Meshcore and Meshtastic, from a protocol perspective, don't work with one another, you'll see that they're separated. So here in the Atlanta area for Meshtastic, we're running a medium fast mode, and that property, along with a couple of other items, puts its frequency at 913 point something. I don't remember exactly, but Meshcore and Meshtastic in the Atlanta area don't interfere with one another frequency-wise. And at home, matter of fact, one of my Meshtastic devices that I use as a client base, which is pseudo to a repeater, sits right next to this repeater with also the large antenna. Low license required. Unlike Meshtastic, in Meshtastic you can go in and turn it on licensed amateur radio mode, which turns off encryption. It also gets you off the unlicensed mesh. There is no equivalent license mode operation in Meshcore, so there is no ham operation per se for Meshcore. The duty cycle and power constraints vary. I mentioned the processors here. The ESP32 is a power hog, but also Meshcore, it is more frugal. Your pocket device, your companion as we call it, is not repeating everyone's packets. It's only handling stuff that's directed to you or you're sending out. It's not repeating like a Meshtastic client would do. And that means it's not using as much power throughout the day repeating someone else's traffic. So that's one of the advantages of this. Down here, I mentioned the frequency, but bandwidth 62.5 kHz. The spreading factor, which is basically how fast the symbols go and it affects range and performance, and the coding rate of 5, which is they basically add some forward error correction bits onto your message to handle corruption and transit and try to recover from that. Those two factors, along with the frequency, if you change any one of those three, you're not going to communicate with the rest of the net, which is on the US-Canada default preset. So when you do get a Meshcore device, don't go in and change those items unless you really know what you're doing. Transmit power, officially 22 dB. However, I read very, very recently, I know the ESP32 based devices, they can do 28 dB. Now, even though the software in the Meshcore app will not let you set a number higher than 22 for transmit power.
Yes, it does.
Well, I just tried it. It didn't work. But what I did read is when you set it to 22, if it's an ESP32, it will boost up to 28. So
I set my repeater to 28, actually to 30, and it didn't forecast.
oh, with me it went na 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 na. Oh, that's being recorded. I'm sorry, Ed. Okay. Range expectations. Now, I know a few of you have talked about, well, I can't hear anybody, no one can hear me. And that's a problem I had initially until I put this device as a repeater on my second floor in a westward-facing window. And that opened up the world to me. Can you see on the very far left of the slide, I think it says Sweet Mountain Repeater? Okay. That's like 24 miles away from me. And that one repeater is how I get out into the rest of the world, through that one repeater. There is another repeater kind of buried underneath me. BWE. Is KK4 BWE here? Well, if he was, I'd say thank you because you're my other repeater. All right. So you can get line of sight wise very, very far. And that's an illustration. And Sweet Mountain Repeater has literally opened up the world to my connectivity. And that's it. So everything's also dependent upon what? Terrain, elevation, and stuff. So there are limitations, low bandwidth in terms of what you can send and how fast. It's text only. Piece of trivia, the maximum packet payload is 184 bytes. Now, that doesn't mean you can send a message which is 184 bytes in size. Why? Because the packet has a header, and the header contains information necessary for routing that data. So, and depending upon your settings, the amount that you have available when you enter a text message can vary anywhere between roughly 130 and 140 bytes. Okay? Equipment, examples. If you saw Ed's presentation last month, I believe he showed equipment, Heltec expansion kit. By the way, I just ordered my 4th Heltec V4 expansion kit, which is that one. They've gone through a couple upgrades. One of the upgrades is they put a little micro SD card reader in the side of it. And if you have the right software, you can get maps on the display and see your location and nodes around you on the built-in map. And it's a TFT touchscreen too, which is really cool. I don't work for Heltec, but I'm on my 4th one coming in. Slow boat from China. I mentioned before, it's a community effort porting to increasing number of hardware. Ray, you already put it away. I was going to ask you to raise your solar node, but we'll get him later to do that. And there's that private effort that I mentioned before, Kirby and others doing their own version of a Meshcore app, and they're great. You're going to pay a few bucks from them. The Ripley Radios one, for example, I looked at their website a handful of times. They make a customized version that works with the Heltec V4 that uses the TFT display, and you can put maps on there. The one thing that the Heltec here was missing was a micro SD card to hold the maps. This is my 2nd floor window at my house. You can see there's 2 antennas. The first one on the right is this guy when he's mounted to handle my traffic from my house. And the second antenna goes to another Heltec V4 that's in a DIY kit that I put together, and that handles my Meshtastic traffic. But anyway, it's very important that you get whatever elevation you can and you put on a decent antenna. This little Think node came with a little bitty stubby antenna, and I gave it a little more gain to it. And also, if you can have it unimpeded by walls and stuff, that's even better. If you can have it outside mounted. If you live in an HOA, make sure you're very good at hiding it. At my HOA, it's a $25 a day fine. Okay, Meshcore node roles. And this is something very important to understand too, and this is different than Meshtastic. The companion, repeater, and room server. And I have experience with all 3 of those configurations. Unlike Meshtastic, when you load the Meshtastic firmware, you can select a number of different profiles for operation. With Meshcore, you have to select the specific firmware for a specific mode, i.e. companion, repeater, or room server, and install the specific firmware for the mode you want to operate. The companion, and this is another difference between Meshtastic and Meshcore, is that with Meshtastic, I can interface my devices. If it has Wi-Fi, like an ESP32 chip, I can access my Meshtastic through either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or USB if I connect the USB cord to it. Uh-oh, I can see Steve wants to talk.
I found an alternate that allows, I can connect Wi-Fi or I can connect mine. In fact, mine is connected right now with Wi-Fi.
Yes, but it's a special so the companion device is what you typically interface to. You use a app like you do with Meshtastic. You use a Meshcore app to talk to the companion device. And from that, you can get to the rest of the world. Repeaters in Meshtastic, repeaters can also, you can connect to and do things through them. With Meshcore, your repeater is exactly that. It is a repeater and only a repeater. And unless you've hacked it like Steve has, the only way you can access it is either through a USB interface or through a LoRa over the mesh feature that's part of the companion app. And I'll illustrate that. Room servers. I actually put a room server up when I first got that particular Heltec V4 for Meshcore use. I put it up. And the room server, if you ever operated packet radio, AX25 stuff, and you went to a bulletin board and you could type into the bulletin board and get messages back, this is a very primitive version of that type of feature. So with a room server, you can connect a room server, you can leave messages. Someone later, like if we had a GARS room server, a GARS member can come to that room server and see what messages were there, leave messages, pick up messages, and that type of stuff. That's the room server. And the room server has a configuration option. You can also make it act as a pseudo repeater. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with a room server. Okay, those are the main node roles. There is an oddball, and the oddball is called an observer. You know, that what's George Orwell, 1984, where you're being watched. Oh, this is being recorded again. I'm sorry. An observer, and this is another difference between Meshtastic and Meshcore. So you kind of get the opinion here. I'm giving you a compare and contrast as we're going through. An observer basically is a companion, a repeater, or a room server that has been hacked through some special procedure and allows that device to connect to the internet to a MQTT server on the internet. And when the observer sees traffic coming through, it goes, oh, I'm going to report that through MQTT to the back-end MQT server. And so with that in mind, if you go to meshcore.io and go to the map that's there, and I'll show you a picture in just a few minutes, you'll see a whole bunch of repeaters, companions, and room servers throughout the globe. And how did it get that information? It got it by an observer reporting the presence of nodes in its that he can hear. Also, by the way, on that same map, you can manually place yourself on there, which will add you to the statistics. And I did that for my own repeater at home. Okay, those are the main nodes, roles. So I mentioned that the user base has greatly grown. This is a screenshot I did of the meshcore.io map back on the 7th. There are, on this particular, 54,953 nodes of one of the three variety of nodes being displayed. And you can zoom in on the map and look at specific areas. I went back this morning and looked at the same site and said, hey, has it grown in number of users? And the answer is yes. This is 54,953 93, it's now 56 something, so it's grown by 2,000 nodes since the 7th. Now, there are a lot more nodes than shown on this map because, folks, you can choose not to publish your location information, which means it's not going to show up on the map. You could be isolated in a small community and not have an observer reporting. So the actual number of Meshcore devices out there is far greater than what the map will show. Just keep that in mind. All right? The companion node, when I access it with my Meshcore app, one of the features is you can bring up a map. And this is when I use my iPad's map display, nodes that are in the greater area around me, right? So this goes South Carolina to the east, into Alabama on the west, north into Tennessee. And these are nodes that my companion has heard through repeaters or direct. Most of it is all through repeaters. Now, if I were to go into my map right now, there's actually a couple of nodes. There's one that popped up and it's disappeared now up in upper state New York. There is a node on my map southeast of Toledo, Ohio, on the Erie there. And that node up there, I looked at the path that it got to get to me. It was like 22 hops. That's a long way. Okay, and we'll talk about paths in just a few minutes. Okay, Steve, you ready with your device? Okay, so we're going to talk about basic messaging. I mean, this is just like almost like Meshtastic in terms of basic concept.
Okay, you got a direct message?
I'll send out a channel first, and then we'll do a direct.
Okay.
But before I jump into the channel, I can actually show this live. But on my right, your left, that is the channels page for my Meshcore app. By default, it's on a public channel, and that's where you see a lot of traffic, barcode, and the text information for the private key up on the GARS website. And so one of the things I'd like you to do, if you are a Meshcore user and you have not done so tonight, add the GARS channel, okay? On the right, is the GARS channel messaging place. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to discontinue with the slides for a moment, bring up my Meshcore app. Oh, by the way, you can see I left it on the view, and there's that Toledo, east of Toledo. I don't know where that's actually at, but believe it or not, that got traffic all the way down to me. So I'm going to go to the channels listing. I'm going to bring up, I got 4 GARS messages I haven't seen. This is the GARS channel that we're all going to add to our Meshcore devices. And Steve, why don't you go ahead and just send me a message. And keep it polite, please. This is in the public world, and they're on camera.
Well, I can't type, so I just sent you a release.
Okay, thank you, Hal. And David, that's great. In fact, I'm going to send him back a message. Well, I'll send a message back to the group. Yay. So very simply, type it in, and the little arrow is the send arrow on the bottom. Just press that, and it goes. Now, here's a little piece of trivia. You see where my cursor is currently at, and it says send a message. There's a little plus symbol there. That's kind of like press me and see what's there. So I'm going to press that.
My hello showed up a long time after I sent it.
Oh, that's the relay delay. No. All right. Quit it. So there's some. Dion, stop. So you got some things you can do here, right? So I want to send out my contact info. And you can click on that and copy and paste it into the add a contact manual listing, or you can do a copy to clipboard, and there's a enter that new contact from the clipboard. But I'm just illustrating here that there's this particular feature that allows you to add stuff into it. So my current position, that's kind of handy, although it's using my location at my house.
You may still show up at the Cracker Barrel too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's another difference between Meshtastic and Meshcore. Meshcore does not support picking up your GPS info from your smartphone. Meshtastic, that's an option that you can do. So both of these have GPSs, but they're not going to get any satellites in here. Alrighty, that's sending a channel message, right? So I am going to find Steve. I ought to pick on Dion, but we're going to do Steve. I'm going to search for his device. Oh, WB2OGY core. That's what you're on tonight, Steve. I'm going to select him. And notice now I have a message window, and I can send a direct message to Steve. You know, I'm terrible at typing, but when I'm in front of a group like this, I'm even worse at it. Is it? So that's a direct message, and by the way, same basic feature, hit the plus symbol, and you can do that. Okay, that's direct, and then we just did channel. Oh, you're here. Okay. By the way, that ding that you're hearing, that's my iPad announcing that a message just came in. That's why I had to tell Dion to quit it. So, okay. Pop back your slides. Adding contacts. So, you can't do direct messaging unless both parties have the person they're sending to in their contact list. So in that case, there's more than 4 ways. These are probably the most common ways to do it. Just before this meeting, I went around to a few people, and I used to scan the QR code to exchange contact information and enter into our respective Meshcore apps. So you can export your contact information to the clipboard. You can then copy that or paste it into a regular phone text message and send it to them. So that's one way you can do it, is using a clipboard link. You could paste into an email a message and send the email. So that's a way to do it. Manual entry, you can go to the add contact page, and I'll show it to you in just a little bit. You can go to the add contact page and just manually enter, although it's kind of terrible because you have to enter their public key, and their public key, leaves a lot of room for error. And then you can advert. And what is an advert? You're advertising yourself to the mesh. And I'll show you an advert in just a moment. All right, we already kind of did a little bit of a demo, but let me go back to the app. Okay. Go back to contacts, get rid of that. Up here in the top right corner, there's a little brackety signal emoji or an icon. And here's where you can initiate an advertisement, an advert. And so I'm going to do a zero hop advert. Now, what's the difference between a zero hop and a flooded advert? The zero hop is going to leave my companion, and it's not going to have it go through a repeater. If I do the flood routed, then that advert is going to also go into the greater mesh network through the repeater setup for the structure that you work within. So I'm going to do a zero advert. And for those of you with Meshcore, you should probably have seen a little message pop, or in the contact list. If you didn't already have me in your contact list, you would have seen new contact message pop up. Okay. While I'm here, I'm going to, what are the little three dots called? Give Ed a gold star. Thank you. Ellipsis. So I can come here and I can go add contact. And I can manually enter, you can tell what type of contact it is. Now, it said chat. It really should have said companion just to be consistent. But anyway, think of chat as your companion device. I can enter a name. So if this was Steve, WB2, OGY, whatever, is convenient. And then you enter the public hex key. And this is where you're talking about a fairly long key. So doing a manual entry, not fun. Scan QR code. Now, if you were holding up your QR codes for me, I could scan them and enter you into my list. That is the most convenient way to do that. You can import from a keyboard, clipboard link, as I talked about earlier. So, this is my QR code. So if you want to add me to your contact list, if you have Meshcore up and running, hopefully from further away, that you can scan that QR code, and that will give you the name of my device along with the public key. And that is the quickest way to do that. Uh-oh, Dallas has got his hand up.
Is that QR code change for every device you own?
Yes. So this is specific to my device, N7GRB MC1, which is my little thick think node. So we're all capable of adding contacts and sharing your info. Okay. So right now I've got 609 contacts in my system. What else can I show while we're talking about this thing? In the tools list, so that sent out a query for repeaters to respond, and so we have a readout, and then we have my little repeater here. So that's another little feature that this has. I'm not going to go through everything that you can do here. It would take the rest of the night, and frankly, I'm still learning myself as we go along. Yeah, Steve says, when you figure it out, they will change it. Now, the next topic here, we're going to talk about paths and message floods. So this is the path associated with a public channel communication that came across, the 9th, when I did a screenshot of this. It's actually like 19 hop path. Not all of the repeaters are shown in this particular path, and I'll show you the list that this is derived from. But anyway, this is a nice feature because it shows you how you are receiving message traffic. And Sweet Mountain Repeater. Swept. Yeah. Thank you. Let's put it this way. It is a sweet repeater to me. But you can see a traffic from all sorts of different directions. If it could hit that particular repeater, I'll get it. Pretty impressive. So how do we find the path for a message that came across? Well, for those of you with your Meshcore devices, you can open up the app and navigate to the channels section. Do the public one because the GARS channel will have just local traffic right now. And basically, find a message. In this particular case, PAL1 Pro sent a message, and it had 19 hops listed. I'm going, oh, 19 hops, that's a lot of hops. Where did it come from? And so I went through the following procedure. If you press on the message and hold it for a few moments, this particular pop-up will come up. And you'll find the View Message Paths list. Select that, and you'll get a listing of the path listing that message came to you. Now, one of the problems is not all repeater owners are publishing their location, or they are publishing their location, but you did not receive an advertisement from that repeater to know about it. Okay, so if it's one of those cases, when you bring up a path and you see unknown, that's the problem. You don't have any prior knowledge of that repeater in terms of in your system. Hang on for a couple more slides. But that's one of those leading questions. Thank you. Don't let me forget about it, okay? So that's the listing. And now at the bottom right of that particular page, you'll see a view map or map view. Select that, and that will bring up a map with a path. Now, a few of you that are trying this, it's probably not working. And why? One of the restrictions here is your app and your device needs to be connected to your device at the time that message came through. The device does not retain that. If you come back later and you see a list of messages you haven't read, because you weren't connected to the device, it doesn't have that path history. And we'll talk about how that path history is created shortly, and then how it ties into your question. All right. When a repeater gets a message, gets a packet forward, the repeater has an identification. and that identification is added to the message packet header. And so as your message is being bounced around the mesh network through repeaters, each repeater is adding its little own breadcrumb to the header. That's why I mentioned earlier that a message packet, 184 bytes, but you only have like 130 to 140. Why? Because that header is getting packed with repeater identifications. Okay? Did you read the manual? You are limited to the number of hops. Now, what is the breadcrumb? What does it consist of? Basically, if you were to look at the repeater's public key, the first n number of bytes of that key form the little breadcrumb that identifies it. And with your companion device, when you send a message, I know this is a lot of information, so I hope I get a lot of yawns. It's a lot of information. When you send a message, one of the things that you do in your configuration is you tell the network how many bytes to use as it goes down the path of all these repeaters. How many bytes of ID information is each repeater supposed to put in? And back when they first came out with Meshcore, it was a 1 byte identification. So that would have been like my public key is like Alpha Charlie XY. That would have been my repeater's ID. You added another byte, and that doubles in size. You add another byte, and it triples in size. With 1 byte, I don't think a 0 ID exists, but with 1 byte, you can ID 254 repeaters. There's a heck of a lot more repeaters in the world than 254. So when they were using 1 byte breadcrumbs or IDs, you had a lot of conflict with other repeaters that had the same breadcrumb ID. And that would cause confusion when you did a map list, or sorry, you viewed the list or you viewed the map. There would be errors in that. And they have a way of rendering that on the map view. But basically, one of the things I do recommend that you do, and it's a configuration item on your companion device, is by default, it's probably set right now by default to a 1 byte operating mode, requesting repeaters to add on their ID. Set that to 2 or 3. Now, when you have it set to 2, with a 1 byte, back to the question, with a 1 byte, you can do 64 hops. With a 2 byte, you can do your message can do 32 hops because you have a fixed size packet and you're trying to cram more information into the header, so you're losing space. And with a 3 byte, you would think, well, it would be half of 32, 16. No, it's 21 for some odd reason. But basically, I get traffic from way up north that is 22 or so, and so I have mine set for 2 bytes. There'll come a time when congestion gets high, and I'll probably want to use the new region feature that they have in experimental mode. I believe Ed talked about that last month, but that's coming down the road. But right now, I would recommend something like a 2 byte setting for identifiers. Okay. There's a difference between channel traffic and direct traffic in this regard. Channel traffic is sending out a message to a group chat. There's no definitive destination. It's just getting blasted out there into space. And so in channel traffic, everything is a flood message. Every repeater that hears that message is going to repeat it out into the wild, right? With direct messaging, or even replying to a channel message, with direct messaging, you can have a well-defined path that message is going to go. And we'll talk about how that path gets built. So I've already mentioned, repeaters are dedicated in Meshcore and optional the room servers if you have that feature enabled. And we talked about every repeater adding its little breadcrumb hash, group channels, or all flooded messages. Route learning. When a destination device, my companion, receives a message that came out through a flooded message out through a group chat, if my companion and my app were connected at the time that message came in, and I got that path information that we looked at earlier, if I do a reply to that user, it's going to try and use that path to get back to that user. Now, it's going to try it n number of times, and if it can't get your message through to the end user following that definitive path, it falls back to using the generic flood the whole world type of approach. And that's the infamous healing of the network. If a repeater goes away, you're not going to be able to make that same path going back to the person you're replying to. And so the system will detect the fact that path is no longer valid, and it'll retry sending your message, but in a flood mode versus a directed path mode. Kind of really cool. All right. Questions so far?
Does this work independent of Wi-Fi and internet? Do you have to have one or the other?
The generic, independent of Wi-Fi. It's independent of the internet. The place where the internet steps into play is if you are configured as an observer and the observer is seeing traffic. But unlike Meshtastic, where you can implement or enable MQTT internet service, you can't, unless you're Steve, you can't do that with a normal firmware.
Okay, can you go node to node, or does it have to go through a repeater?
You can go node to node. In fact, that's what Steve and I were doing here just a little bit. We were doing direct messaging, not using a repeater. Now, when you create a message, you can go into one of the options and you can actually specify a path. So if you have written down somewhere a path that has been working for you to a particular person, you can manually enter that path and it'll go, using those breadcrumb identifiers for the repeaters. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the difference between Meshcore and digipeaters and the inodes? Because it looks like it does the same kind of thing. It has the concept of hops. It transmits all sorts of data back and forth, and it directs it in different ways. And
so fundamentally, between Meshcore and Meshtastic, when it comes to repeaters, Meshtastic, everything is flood. There's no directing of a path. Everything is flood. Digipeaters. Oh, I can see John back there.
What you're asking, I think, is digipeaters are an amateur radio service. Meshcore is unlicensed. It's Part 15. Anybody can have it. You can have your family on Meshcore and talk to each other, text to each other, where you'd have to have a license to do it on digipeaters. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'd add to what John just said. Digipeater is also a store and forward. Meshtastic is repeater, store and forward. Steve.
Another major factor is this is using 900 megahertz, which doesn't go too far, and the average digipeater is on 2 meters, which can go much further, much easier, much higher. I mean, even if you're running an HT, it's 5 watts, where this thing is running, in my case, actually this one is only running the 22 dBm, so much less than a watt versus 5 watts, and my repeater is only 1 watt, so 2 meters is going to get you further.
Oh, hey, David, what's the tower up near Hamilton Mill? What's it called?
Toggle.
Tugger?
Toggle
Tuggle.
Road.
Yeah. So we're going to get a Meshcore repeater put up there? I'll try. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Another question.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm not trying to put this simply. Why can Meshtastic be a subset of Meshcore? Why do they have to be separate? What's the technical reason why they're?
They're different protocols. They're not on a common core. A Meshtastic device and a Meshcore won't recognize each other's packets.
But somebody could, I would assume somebody could code into Meshcore the ability to decode Meshtastic and integrate it into their.
Yeah, I have heard of people looking at gateways or bridges where you have one device, Meshtastic, one Meshcore, and a Linux machine in the middle. David is just waving his hand. Yay, more.
Okay, you want to create havoc. Okay, if you get Meshtastic information running across Meshcore, you will flood. Meshtastic is flooding everywhere. It doesn't matter. It's like the old ham broadnet ham stuff. It went on 2.4 gig. Yeah.
It's, to put it in DMAR terms, it's what's the Brandmeister versus the original bunch. Somebody decided they could do it better. It's hams.
Yeah, that and congestion on the channel. Meshtastic has a lot of congestion. And when you're in a big city with all of the Meshtastic devices out there pinging around, sending flooding, it's actually flooding the network. Meshcore is controlled better in going from repeaters to devices. It cuts down the overall traffic and congestion on the network. That's the reason Meshcore is starting to take off.
Yeah.
Talk to Elon about that.
Okay. I'm going to kind of blitz through this because we're running out of time. But there's a lot of information on the internet on how to set up devices. I will tell you that it can be a challenge. This little Think node, as an example, when I first, it came with Meshtastic, and I reflashed it to Meshcore, and it worked just great. A couple of weeks ago, I wanted to update it to the most recent version of Meshcore. I have spent probably about 30 to 40 man hours and a handful of email messages to the ELCROW, E-L-C-R-O-W, ELCROW, support people on why this was not going into download or bootload mode. And I will tell you, from one particular device to the next, the method for getting it into download boot mode varies. So, as an example, with this Think node, there's a small pinhole in the base. You press into that and it hits the reset button. With it connected through USB to a host computer and it turned on, you press the reset 2 times in reasonably rapid sequence. If you don't do it fast enough, it won't work. If you do it too slow, it won't work. Okay, so the second time around, like I said, I spent a bunch of time on this. I did everything I did the first time when I flashed it earlier with the earlier firmware release. What happened between that first flash and what I was doing 2 weeks ago? Oh, there was a major update on my Apple iMac. turned out Apple added in a security feature that if you're not it won't load a third-party device driver unless you have gone in through layers of menus to find where you can enable third-party device drivers. Oh, it was so frustrating. I even apologized to the support person after I got kind of uppity on the last time around with them. Oh, yeah, right. So, these devices, a lot of these don't use FTDI. Yeah, don't use the FTDI chip. Use a CH340 or CH or CP210. Why? Because the FTDI chip, in terms of production cost, is like $2 or $3 for that little chip. The Chinese knockoff is like 13 to 15 cents. So they're not going to pay the royalty for FTDI, very proprietary chip. So you have to have a device driver that works with those. Anyway, so you get your host set up, you have the right device driver, you've enabled third-party devices in your host OS, you connect it up, you go through the procedure to put it into boot mode, and then you go through the flashing process, and I'll show you that in a minute. The Heltec V4 is a little bit easier, in my opinion, to get it into boot mode. There's 4 buttons on the side. One says user, one says RST for reset. You press and hold the user button, you momentarily press the reset, and poof, it's into download boot mode. You go to the Meshcore IO webpage, there's a flasher there, you select your device. For example, I'm going to use the Heltec V4, which I also updated to the most recent version. You choose your device from a list of devices that are directly supported. And then once you've done that, you select it, and this is the page you see. Now, notice how there's Ripple firmware and community firmware. If you go the Ripple route, it's great stuff, but you're going to pay for it. There's a user fee for that. Community firmware, free, all right? So it depends what you want in terms of features. So this is an example for doing the Think Nub. Once I got my Mac OS to say, yes, I'll let you do it. Anyway, I select companion Bluetooth. Notice there's a companion USB. So if you install the USB firmware, you're not going to be able to connect it with Bluetooth. You install the Bluetooth firmware, you're not going to be able to connect it to it with USB. So think wisely. The repeater and room server are there to download. So having said that, I've selected the companion Bluetooth mode. They're up to version 117 now, I believe. And if this is your first time around putting Meshcore onto a device, you want to click Erase Device. That's going to erase all prior configuration information from the device. It's going to be like a clean slate that you're loading the firmware into. If this is doing an update, don't erase. It'll save your configuration information that you've been using. Really, really nice. So anyway, here we are. We press flash. You get a pop-up. Now this is a Mac OS. So it's going to look a little different on a Windows, but it's going to be the same basic type of pop-up, only you're going to be seeing COM ports. Okay? So I select the entry for my USB device with the CH340 driver and hit connect. And then what you'll see is that pop-up will be replaced by basically a sequence of status that I'm writing an address and the percentage. And when it's done, it hits 100%. You'll get, in my case, it's trying to reset the device for me. Some devices will not reset through the USB connection, and you have to go in and manually hit that little reset pin or on the side of the V4, the reset. But basically, once you have that flashing is complete, you're done. Reset the device, and you're up and running First time around, there's more steps to be done. Second time around, you're already good to go because you've done the configuration steps. So in this case, because I did the Bluetooth version, to do the configuration now of my companion through Bluetooth, I need my app, my trusty Meshcore app. And I'll bring that up and go to the connect via BLE option. And it shows me the BLE devices that it knows about. And in this case, I'm putting actually companion software on this V4 expansion kit in order to do this. It gives, because it has a display, it gives me a PIN number. I enter it into the pairing, just like you do for a normal Bluetooth device that generates pins. Now, if you have a Meshcore device that has no display, the manufacturer will tell you what the default pin is. Half the time it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. So now that I'm paired up, I've got some homework to do. That's almost done. But basically, first thing to do, give your device a name. So I call mine N7GRB MC for Meshcore 1. So WB2OGY core, but basically a lot of ham operators put their call signs into their device names. A lot of people that aren't hams, or even some that are hams, they'll give it an interesting name like Downtown Swanee or something like that. You know, but
If you use your call letter, people can actually look you up or find you and may know you. If you use some strange thing, they may be trying, not even know they know you. So
yep.
be friendly.
Yep. The next item, give a position. You know your lat long, you can type it in. There's also a little icon to the right. You can press on that. It brings up a map. You can go on the map, find where you're at, press, and it records that lat long. Those are two methods to do that. Now this next one is not optional. It is a must. It says select preset. So when you press on that, it'll bring up a pop-up list of regions around the world. You want to select US, Canada. And that will then come and assign the default properties that we're using here in the US and Canada region. That's the frequency we're on, sprig factor, coding that we talked about briefly earlier, transmit power. If you're Steve, you can get it above 22. I haven't been able to do that. Anyway, that's that particular page. If you scroll down further, if you have a GPS, that's where you would enable GPS. Okay. There is a selection for experimental settings, and when you set up, I'd like you to go there, and you'll note that there's a place, we talked about breadcrumbs, right? And how when you send a message, it sets either a 1, 2, or 3 byte breadcrumb requirement. This is where you set that default breadcrumb requirement on the experimental settings. And normally when I came here, it was 1 byte. I set it to 2. Okay, so believe it or not, when you've done that and saved it, by the way, you see a little check mark in the top right corner? That's really the save button, okay? So you're up and running. You have a companion. Now, can you talk to anyone? Depends upon where you are, your location, and everything else that we talked about earlier. Adding a GARS channel. Go to the GARS website. And at the GARS website, other info, GARS Meshcore channel, which I'm already at. And then on I showed this earlier, We'll just go there before. Add channel. Scan QR code. Point your camera at the QR code on the GARS website. And lo and behold, poof, you've added the GARS channel. Pretty straightforward. That's the easiest, fastest way to do it. Yep. Closing thoughts, and then I'm going to really blitz through this. Just some random notes here. Repeaters and room servers. I've been to this already. The user interface, the USB interface, like what I mentioned with my Think Mode, requires a special driver. Comes from a Chinese website. If you trust it, you trust it. If you don't, you don't. And then you might run into the problem I mentioned where your operating system is going, no, you may not install a third-party device that I have not signed with my permission. Ongoing administration of room servers and repeaters is different than what I just showed you. And this is something I should also really quickly point out. I am going to go back to the contact list. I am going to look up this is my repeater. I am talking to my repeater through my Think node. So my companion now is going to connect to my repeater. So I have it set to automatically give me the repeater's status information. Battery life is a good one, by the way, when I'm off USB-C power. So I come here and hit settings. These are settings that I initially set when I did the flash of a repeater. Flash of a repeater or a room server, you have to use the Meshcore.io configuration web app through a USB interface. You do that immediately after flashing the device. And then once you have the device flashed and you have given it a name and other information, you can then administrate it through a companion device. So notice how a lot of this information is blank. And that is because they're trying to reduce the amount of traffic on the mesh by people accessing repeaters. So if I wanted to see my radio settings, I have the little squirrely thing there, and it'll populate with the configuration information that we talked about earlier. I can come down here and I can initiate a flood message. It just sent out my repeater's location and public key and identity. I can come here and manually set the repeater's location. I can bring up a map. I can, I'm not going to, I guess I want to be Australia. I can click on Australia someplace and it'll put that lat long into the repeater. I'm not going to hit the check mark, that will then save that. So that's how, once you got the initial configuration of your room server repeater done through the USB interface using the Meshcore.io web application, all further administration, once you've done that, can be done through your companion device as I illustrated here. Okay. Oh. When you flash a device, it's going to have a default well-known password for the administration interface. Your room server is going to have a default well-known password for guests to log in. I highly recommend you put in a private password so that you don't have people arbitrarily administering your repeater or administrating the room server, but you can put a guest password on there, like hello is one of the ones that's recommended if you want it to be public available, or you can actually clear the password and have no password on it. Set the repeater to auto advert. We talked about advertisements and how that advertisement announces to the world that you're here, and that's a good thing for repeaters to do. that's a configuration setting you should do. And you can do it for zero hop, which means the repeater is going to send out a message only to adjacent devices, adjacent repeaters, or you can do a flood to the entire mesh. And you can set when that should be done. So my repeater is set to send out a flood message every 12 hours. And it send out a local zero hop every 60 minutes. There's a feature in the repeater to allow you to see your immediate neighbors. And you've seen this slide before when it began, but that Sweet Mountain repeater is my primary access to the world. We talked a little bit about the Meshcore. Actually, we talked a lot about Meshcore versus Meshtastic. I don't think there's anything new here that I haven't already talked about. The licensing is open source. One's GPL, the other one's MIT. And then Meshcore, as talked about earlier, it's really good for an infrastructure device, infrastructure implementation. Yes, sir.
You suggested setting your repeater to auto advert. Is that just so that other Meshcore nodes know it's there and that they can use it for repeating?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
And otherwise it just doesn't participate in the network?
It will participate in the network.
It's less likely to?
You won't see it on a map unless you've manually put it on a map, because an MQTT observer won't know where you're at because you haven't advertised your location and that type of stuff.
All right.
Yep. Hal in the back.
I guess I was looking at that observer. That's not something you can actually pick it off the Meshcore.io flasher. You have to go to another website to actually get that firmware to make observer.
You don't get a replacement firmware. You get instructions on how to hack the current firmware.
Ah.
Yeah.
Kind of like the guy on The Martian. He hacked the rover to be able to talk to Earth.
Yeah. I haven't tried it. I may have to go do that. But I've been at that website. That's what it amounts to. It's not a replacement firmware. It's modifying the existing firmware. Okay? Okay. You know, I was telling Kevin I was worried I wasn't going to fill up the meeting. Any more questions? Hal? Well, okay, so you can order this with different options.
Yeah.
One is a clear plastic cover, and the V4 has its own little display, like micro display.
Yeah.
If you order the TFT touchscreen, which is this one, they take that small display off because it won't fit with the TFT in front of it.
You put the touch screen.
But this is a touchscreen.
Yeah.
Now,
But I know it's got a connector on the V4 before, but you order a V4 to go with it without the little OLED screen.
when you order this, you have one of two options, with or without the TFT.
Okay.
If you order it without the TFT, it has a little screen. If you order it with TFT, they do not ship the little screen. It's gone. So it's one or the other, but not both.
Oh, okay. I was looking on there. I thought that was just an option, so you had to get a V4 to go with it. But I'll
No,
look again.
when you get the kit, it does come with a V4. And the question is it the V4 with a itsy bitsy, was it 96.96? Just great. Yeah, this is bigger. Now, I will tell you, the Meshtastic default firmware, you can interact with the screen. The Meshcore for the repeater, all I do is get information. So, yeah, so there's the frequency setting, for example. And that's about all the repeater will do when you press the button. So, I didn't explore further. I had it up there just long enough to create a slide. All right. Any other questions?
When I set up my repeater, it had a value for duty cycle, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not so much here in the U.S. for the ISM band, but in the EU, and it varies upon where in the EU, they have limits on the duty cycle, transmit versus receive time. And I heard in the EU area, you're safe if you limit the duty cycle to 10% transmit. No more than 10% of a block of time can you transmit. Here in the U.S., and I read this just recently, there is no FCC requirement to control the duty cycle. So when we're operating that U.S.-Canada region, you don't have to worry about duty cycle. If you take this overseas, yes, you do. I don't know if that answered your question or not. That's a good one.
We need to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up. Yours.